Welcome back to Built to Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping real AI products into the world. Today, I'm joined by Filip, co-founder of Soap Payments, an AI native payments platform that provides unified payment infra, underwriting automation, and fraud protection for high-risk industries like gaming. Filip, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Tyler. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I want to learn a bit more about your background. What were you doing before Soap, and how'd you get the idea? How'd the business start?
Absolutely. So I have a technical background. I actually started my career in consulting, but quickly realized it was not technical enough for me. Went back to school, got a master's degree in data science back in 2019. So I kind of got into AI pretty early before ChatGPT came out, and so I've been playing around with building the models and like generating images with like the first generation of the deep neural networks, and then ChatGPT came around and everything exploded 3 years ago. So it's been a great time to be applying AI into different industries. So I've been kind of working in financial services most of my professional career. Worked at Fidelity as a data scientist, where I was working on personalization. So we were basically matching financial products to customers, doing a lot of call center optimization. After that, I was in the mortgage lending technology space. I was there for about a year and a half. After that, I was working a little bit as a independent consultant before I ultimately ended with Soap. So we started Soap around a year and a half ago, and the idea is essentially, can you automate everything around payments to make like a very seamless and scalable experience for digital merchants? So today, obviously, we have Stripe as like one of the biggest providers of payments for the e-commerce industries. However, they are mostly focused on SMBs, and they do not serve more like complex merchants, where we come in today. Complex merchants are basically companies which need a lot of paperwork to get onboarded. There's a higher risk of chargebacks, fraud, etc. There's like a unique set of challenges which we are automating with AI and also with like very bespoke payment stack. So it was kind of like a long-winded, introduction
That's
about what we
great.
do.
No, I love, first of all, the background in data science. I also started my career in analytics, data science, data engineering. And so it's been interesting to see a field that was definitely getting really popular around the time that we were doing it, but now it's like just blown up because everyone's become more familiar with, whether they know it or not, like with machine learning. Now they're using pre-trained models. It's just interesting to see the paradigm shift from, oh, you need all this data and you need to spend all this time training something without knowing, is it going to work, to, hey, it's already trained for me, and really expanded who can use it.
Yeah. It's very abstracted, So you
Yeah,
look at
very
kind of
abstracted.
everything goes through API. Back when I was studying data science, we were classifying cats and dogs,
Yep. Yeah, and I think one thing that I think is beneficial of coming from like the data science background is kind of the right tool for the right job. Like, because how the model works under the hood beyond just the API, maybe like, okay, let's not ask an LLM to do math, right? Where some people might think like, sure, you could give it a tool that it can do a tool call for, and then make a calculation. But maybe it's just me convincing myself that my experience matters. But that's one thing that I like having a background in when working with, these systems. I wanted to dig into the sort of like payment space. I also have a bit of experience there. I worked in e-com. Chargebacks were a big thing. Merchant processing. There's like so many I still today can't even explain exactly, how it all works, but I know it's complicated.
Yes.
I know that there's like a whole process for if a customer, gets a refund, you can dispute it. And, at a certain point, your merchant with too many chargebacks, you need to like, get new merchants or something like that onboarded. There's just a lot of complexity and a lot of manual work that goes into it. How are you guys thinking about like tackling that? Are you starting with one segment of it, or do you have to do the whole thing to make it matter or be useful?
Absolutely. So I always think about payments, especially the online payments, and we call it like a lot of the times CNP, card not present, right? Like in the US, you still have majority of credit cards. Now we obviously have everything powered by stablecoins. So I don't want to get into that, but I want to think of payments as like the iceberg, right? Like you just see the top, and then there's just like this whole thing like below, and it's just absolutely massive. Like, when you have a credit card transaction in our space, they might be like 5 to 7 to 10 different parties who are actually like touching the money before it goes from A to B, right? And so it's extremely complicated. There's a lot of different things going on behind the scenes. Um, and so what we are doing is we are connecting those pieces together into one unified solution. So in that sense, it is, you can think of it as Stripe. However, uh, we are operating again more in the complex merchant space. That's number one. And number two is, um, we are working on automating absolutely everything. And so we think that's where kind of agents come in, where we can scale the business without hiring, a ton of people to kind of deal with the long tail of problems. Because if you think about payments, there's, yes, like I swipe a card or I like connect my wallet. It's number one, but then you have so much paperwork, right? Like you need to satisfy banks, you need to reconcile accounts. Now you have like different entities in different jurisdictions. Like there is just, endless amount of paperwork, if you will. And then all today is done manually pretty much. Nobody has really tried to automate it end to end, like as a vertical stack. And that's kind of our vision. We're not going to build all of those components ourselves. Like for KYC, we have a provider.
Hmm.
You mentioned chargebacks. We actually work with a very cool insurance provider for chargebacks, which is pretty unique. So we actually can give people insurance for against chargebacks. We are recently started onboarding on a stablecoin infrastructure as well, which kind of allows
Wow.
us to do a lot of cool stuff. So there's a lot going on, and I could be going on and on. But yeah, I know that the focus for today is agents and AI and how we're applying it. So happy to drive the conversation that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the background's great. I think the key to take away here is payments is so complex. I love the iceberg analogy. There's so much that happens behind the scenes that a consumer doesn't know, and even a lot of people in the company don't know, is happening. So let's take that segue that you gave us and move into the AI side. This is very
Mhm.
complex. Obviously, models have gotten better, but I'm sure there's places where AI makes sense and where it doesn't. What are the, I don't know, 1, 2, 5, 10 places in your product that you're using AI? Is it like a conversational situation where the customer's talking with the AI, or is it all happening behind the scenes? Like, paint us a picture of like the overall
Mhm.
architecture.
Yeah. So our business, we has pretty much like two products. We call it the core, and then we talk about the kind of the agentic system automation, right? So the core is just kind of the Stripe like orchestration of payments and like all of the bells and whistles. So that piece has tangential AI components. Like we do some things like matching card name to your player's account name if it's a game, or we kind of look at like some pattern matching, etc., to like flag risk factors. But for the most part, it's like pretty much just core infra. Where the AI agent stuff comes in, it's everything that happens around that. So it all starts with like onboarding. And when you go from people think like, hey, I can just open a Stripe account, right? And I can start processing cards in 5 minutes or whatever, right? That's not really the case at all in kind of the complex merchant space. So for example, if you try to do betting online, it can take several months to get
Wow.
approved to process a credit card. So, it's a completely broken process. You have 50 documents you need to provide to the bank, to the processor, and on and on and on. And they have all these requirements. And then now let's say you want to have three quotes, right? And so you go
Mm.
three different PSPs, all of them have different requirements and all just like is primed to basically cut with the LLM into like one unified form. And so that's the first thing we did is we basically have a basically workflow automation which takes these 50 pages of different cases of like, hey, you're international owner, you need this set of documents, like
Mm.
your passport needs to be stamped versus like JPEG and stuff. Like it's really this detailed, and then you can kind of go into the long tail. And the goal is to basically get like everything as accurate as possible, so that you don't have to spend like weeks with the underwriters, basically like, hey, like your document on here does not match that, which when you're running vanilla e-commerce business, that's fine. You
Yeah.
provide 3 documents, you're done.
Yeah.
But like if you're sort of in a complex space, you have 50, and so it's becoming a lot. And
I mean,
so
it sounds like
yeah.
it's a really important thing to do as a let's say a betting company, right? You have to do this to get payments processed, but it's also like a really low um, val high value, but a lot of time and just a lot of friction. So imagine I'm like starting a betting company. I'm trying to get set up. What does the user experience look like for me when I go onto Soap?
Mhm.
Am I talking like this onboarding workflow? Is it a UI
Yep.
with buttons and behind the scenes when you click a button and AI things happening? Or is it like I'm talking to a conversational agent? How does that work? What does it look like?
Yeah, so when you're onboarding with Soap, essentially you answer a few questions about what's your business, like some basic information, so we can pre-fill the application, so you don't have to spend time. We have like web research agents, which after you give us like 5 data points, they go in, right? They kind of conduct deep research. They already pre-fill all of the stuff, and then we sort of, based on the use case, we sometimes have a short conversation with you, like, okay, we have about 12 different processing partners. Depends what cards you want, like what kind of industry you're in. Do you want crypto? Do you want guaranteed debit? Do you want pay by Wang? Do you want ACH? Like, all these payment methods, they have different approvals. You might have 2 card providers, right? Like, so you have a redundancy in case you get shut off. So those all different people have different requirements. And so we basically use LLMs to like distill that into one unified form. And so that all happens behind the scenes. Well, after we select, okay, we're going to send you to these 5 processors, we kick off the job. Our LLM workflow basically just tags all of the questions and all of the document requirements, like it generates pretty much like a brand new form on the fly. And then, it can change every day. The underwriter from company A can come in and say, hey, like, California banned sweepstakes, for example, like January 1st, right? That's like a very normal thing. So now, you cannot offer services in that state. So all these things like just dynamically change all the time. And so like the idea is like every single time, like it's the most accurate snapshot of what's happening versus like static forms. And so the user comes in and gets like one form. And the other thing what we do is we actually also generate the instructions for the we
Hmm.
call it like the underwriting agent.
Hmm.
And so it's sort of like a meta, right? So like
Hmm.
once you come and start filling out a form, each step we are generating the instructions to self-correct the form. So
Hmm.
like say I go and I fill out the first 10 questions, then our underwriting agent has instructions and tool calls to be able to like confirm that, to make sure it matches against everything. And it gives you like real-time feedback versus you waiting 5 days for a human to take a look and
Hmm.
like flag it, right? So this way we just sort of really starting to like short circuit the time it takes to like push in what's called EDD today. It's called the enhanced due diligence. That's
Hmm.
kind of done for any like complex merchants, anybody who is doing like not just gaming, like travel, like supplements, like a lot of like marketplaces, crypto companies. There's so many of these which have higher chargebacks, and so they need to submit all documents, and so we help with that.
So it sounds like the behind the scenes agent part is distilling information based on like the form you filled out, like, hey, these are the processors or the payment types and the forms you're going to need to fill out. And then as you're going through the process of filling it out, there is a conversational agent, the underwriting agent, who's guiding you through
Yep.
and saying, hey, actually, you did that wrong. This is how you need to fill this out and save you a ton of time versus waiting. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We do that. Also, we like constantly monitor how these underwriting requirements are changing. So, like our partners have their own side of the portal, if you will, where
Mm.
they can adjust things. We also monitor and ingest things like as they change in like on the internet, and then like based on that, we synthesize every single time. Like, hey, this is like an easier way for you to do this, and like we were able to onboard a customer for credit cards within 1 week, which was kind of
Wow,
like, usually it's like 3 or 4 weeks timeline. So we're looking at
that's
like
awesome.
75% time reduction.
So it sounds like this is pretty complex to keep up with because you have so many different regulations. You mentioned California changes their laws. It sounds like one of the ways you handle that is you give your partners the ability to like change a configuration. But there's a lot of talk in the industry today. People have finally gotten agents into production. They're past the like testing locally and running like local evals or their own like vibe checks. And now they're
Hmm.
starting to figure out like, how do I handle drift? How do I handle like customers asking different things I didn't expect? It sounds like for you, one of those drift possibilities is like, it's not even something about the agent itself. It's about the environment around it, which is that like the laws can change. One way you're doing that is by giving your partners the ability and responsibility to keep that up to date. Is there anything you do on the actual like agent or model side? How do you keep track of like, hey, 3 weeks ago the underwriting agent was giving great advice? Um, do you have a way to see how that's going
Hmm.
now? A lot of folks are
Hmm.
starting to struggle with like that monitoring and evaluation of agents in
Yeah.
production.
Yeah, so I think like first of all, you can't monitor what you don't measure or you log, right? So we log everything. So we have we call it validation logs. So we validate all of the like feedback criteria, all of the forms we're creating, everything is being logged. And then essentially we have like a batch job which comes in and kind of looks at like, hey, uh just kind of like a very, I would say in this scenario it's like a LLM as a judge.
Mhm.
If folks are familiar
Yeah.
with that, where you have a different model which basically looks at the previous responses and compares. There's like
For
a
those
standard
logs
pipeline
and
we're
for the
using.
for the logs and the LM as a judge, are you like the logs, are you just storing them in CloudWatch or something, or do you have a specific tool that you use? For the LM as a judge, are you using a tool or an open source framework for that, or do you just do a direct call to OpenAI? I think that would be helpful for the audience if you could share what you found to
Yeah,
be
so
successful.
we have experimented with a few things for agentic evaluations, and like people talk about RL environments today. There's a tool called Verifiers, which is an open source tool from a company called Prime Intellect, which is one of the uh, AI Neo Labs. And yeah, so they basically have a concept of a RL environment. And so what you can do is you set up the environment as for us being like, say, like the form environment. And then you have a agent, and the agent does what's called a rollout, right? So the rollout in the environment is like basically tool calls environment, right? Responds back, and it goes until it hits the stop message. And so this way you can kind of do that. And then in the end, there is a rubric. And the rubric is basically a set of evals or set of like whatever evaluation criteria. You can start something less simple, like, hey, how many steps did the agent take to like succeed? To like, hey, I'm gonna add the LLM judge there in the loop, and like I'm gonna just give it like a basic prompt. You do a bunch of these rollouts, so you kind of cover the stochasticity, right? So you can do like 5 rollouts per set, which means like you're gonna have 5 data points per one thing, and then you can like do like averaging, being like, hey, okay, well this looks good on average versus just doing it like once and stuff. So that's something we have done a bunch.
That's
We
really interesting.
obviously,
We've
yeah,
we've had folks talk about LM as a judge. It's pretty popular in evals on the pod before, but I don't think we've had anyone mention this RL environment. I assume you're meaning like reinforcement learning, or correct me if I'm wrong.
yes, that's right.
Um, and it sounds like this is a little bit more sophisticated because you're actually running it against a bunch of different scenarios and then maybe having some sort of feedback loop. So,
That's right.
what was the name of the company again, or the tool,
Uh,
the framework?
Prime Intellect. Prime
Prime
Intellect is
Intellect.
the company, and
Cool.
then the tool is
Yeah.
called Verifiers. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. And then when it comes to
Yeah.
logging itself, are you using something like Langsmith, or is it more traditional tool like Datadog or
Uh,
CloudWatch?
we're just I mean these logs are not like that it's not like millisecond latency. We just use Base for it, so
Nice.
it's just like a tabular kind of stuff. Plus Base is nice because they also have the S3 abstraction on top, so you can like you can unify everything, like
Mm.
you unify like the edge functions with like the S3 bucket basically with the tabular data. So anyway, I do like Base, so it just gives us all in one thing, and we don't have to do much. Like we use Sentry for normal like error logging, but yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple, I would say.
Super cool. Well, I know we're pretty much at time. I want to make sure I have a sec to share your website and let the audience know where to follow along. But is there anything else you wanted to add on the note of like monitoring and production that would be useful advice for folks?
I would say always start simple. Like some of these advanced frameworks I've mentioned, it's just because I've done this for a number of years, so I've seen things. But it might be also that like sometimes I just get too excited about the technology, but the job could be done more simply. And so I would say a basic like a script with a bunch of evaluation prompts is good enough. It's just understanding what's the definition of good, and also understanding when you work with LLMs that it's extremely stochastic. And you gotta first you gotta sample, and then the second you just cannot trust all of the outputs. So
Great words to live by in the LM space. Well, really appreciate all the insights, Philip. Let me put the website up on the screen. It's paywithsoap.com, and maybe you can tell the audience, what's the best way to get in contact, what socials to follow along, and who is like the type of customer or user that should be reaching out to you.
absolutely. So we're very active on LinkedIn. It's just Pivot Soap, and then trying to grow our X presence. We need to do a better job on that. We are mostly helping newer, smaller merchants, and also growing customers who are looking to grow into new regions, or who have problems with chargebacks, or they just want like an all-in-one solution which handles all of the different complexities of managing your online payments. And on the flip side, we also work with payment processors. So we partner and we integrate into them, and then we send them business. So I'd say I'm not exactly sure what the audience of this podcast is, but I would say probably like more startup-y environment. So anybody who wants to have a different experience than Stripe, who is more like high risk, who might not be qualifying for Stripe, come to us. We're open for business. So
Amazing. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for being so generous with sharing tips and advice around how you guys have built your agents. It was great learning more about everything you've built over there at Soap, Philip, and I'm looking forward to continuing to follow along.
thank you, Tyler. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, have a good day now, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks. Bye.